cover-up conspiracy there. In the mid-90s, the Air Force came back with 2 reports saying that in 1947 they had a project called Project Mogul, which was trying to detect Soviet nuclear tests and ballistic missiles with these high-altitude balloons. One of them fell out of the sky. What can you do? Also, what ended up happening later was they started having eyewitness testimony. They started trying to re-interview a lot of the people who had seen stuff like this. The problem was that all the people who came out to talk about this didn't come out for 31 years after the crash had happened. So it was a lot of time had passed, and their viewpoint might have been tainted by stuff that they had heard other people say or see or any number of things like that. In actuality, they interviewed about 25 people, but only 5 of them could have seen it, so you're not really sure who to really believe or what really counts as truth, etc. So you don't really know. Maybe the cover-up actually worked. A lot of people now believe it was a cover-up who are even pro-UFO, like believe aliens exist. Also in 1947, this guy outside of Mount Rainier, Washington, started saying that he saw UFOs. This is Kenneth Arnold. This is the picture that he drew to describe what he was seeing in the sky. So, like I said, this particular history of UFOs is not exactly conclusive. There are a lot of theories that suggest that it's real, that aliens do exist, and that's where we are today. Yeah?
What's the incentive to covering up the alien, problem?
Absolutely. There was a report published by, the Brookings Institution? The Brookings Institution that indicates that if we did find aliens and we did disclose that information, that essentially the public would just freak out. And we would all go crazy. There would be rioting in the streets. I don't know. We'd go nuts. We would have a really severe problem acting right if we found out that there were aliens existing. Anderson.
One time in the Bible we were talking about extraterrestrials. They actually existed. They will solve the world's problems and public engineering.
No, that's Ash Tucker. That would solve it.
And that is we have to work together.
Do what? Speak up. I can't hear you.
It's like aliens were not to exist. They have to work together.
Yeah, we'll get to that a little bit later on because I got some stuff that I'll say about all of that as well. For debate, yeah.
Just a few years ago in Chicago, wasn't there another shut sighting at the airport that there were a lot of witnesses to?
There's actually been a lot of sightings. Well, I mean, this is not a conclusive history. There's been sightings a lot. There was sightings this year in the United Kingdom that people have on YouTube where they think they see flying discs floating in the sky. You see on the clips is a bunch of people freaking out, and then you see flying discs kind of moving around. But these sightings have kept happening from 1947 until now, fairly, I don't want to say the word consistently, but consistently enough for people to be concerned that there are indeed UFOs that do exist and do fly across the world. And actually, there are a lot of times that if you just watch YouTube videos, which are totally of high credibility, you will find different ones that will suggest different things or even show kind of cool stuff. For debate purposes, there are 4 crucial parts of this whenever you are debating against aliens that you have to understand. 4 crucial parts of the debate. The first part is that they exist. The second part is that they don't exist. This is like the uniqueness for your dised. And second, if they do exist, are they peaceful, or are we just screwed? We'll start with that they exist, that part of the debate. 3 kind of main points get made to conclude that they do exist. If you don't, you can count that there are UFO sightings, etc., as part of the debate. The real problem is verifiability, for instance. that there's not a ton of, like, we can't really prove Roswell, etc. And it's eyewitness scenes, which people tend to discount whenever it comes to UFOs, despite it being a really strong piece of evidence for a lot of other things. One of the first points is that there are infinitely large number of galaxies and chances for alien life. Why are we thinking that we are so unique that we would be the only planet that would have this? Lawrence Krauss, who is a fellow of the American Physical Society and the American Association for the Advancement of Scientists, said in 1997 that since our own sun is a rather ordinary star and its place in the galaxy is unremarkable, and since nature repeats herself as often as the laws of physics and chemistry allow, it would be odd if life weren't ubiquitous in the galaxy, or everywhere in the galaxy. It's just a matter of time before we discover our galactic cousins. Another, David Lamb, who's a reader in philosophy and bioethics at the University of Birmingham, said that it's possible that the galaxy is teeming with forms of advanced extraterrestrial life who are so advanced that we are unaware of them. Yet being so much more advanced, they would have no interest in revealing themselves to us. Essentially, this argument is that if they do exist, just because they haven't come and talked to us yet is not necessarily an indication that they don't exist, rather that we are just kind of insignificant, or we don't have anything to offer. Maybe they don't like gold. Maybe they don't need to come here and deal with our nonsense, and they have other stuff to do. If they are capable of heavy, high-speed, intergalactic travel, it would make sense that since we aren't, that they don't really need to learn anything from us. Maybe they've got that one figured out. After that, there's other people, there's professors of zoology at Harvard, Ernst Mayr, who said that to answer the question of the search for intelligent life, there are molecules that are necessary for the origin of life, such as amino acids and nucleic acids that have been identified in cosmic dust. So it would seem quite conceivable that life could originate elsewhere in the universe. Some of the modern scenarios of the origin of life start out with even simpler molecules, which makes an independent origin of life even more probable. So those life molecules could be out there. It's not scientifically conclusive that all life has to have water. There are possibilities that other planets have been able to come across this. It's not conclusive that other planets don't have water. So there's the possibility that across the spectrum of the millions of galaxies and planets that we have, that one of them has bred something that might look like life. Another one, Carl Sagan, who's a professor of astronomy and space sciences at Cornell, wrote in 1994 that should optimistic estimates prevail, and 1 in every million star shelters a nearby technological civilization, then the nearest one would be a few hundred light years away. Some 150 years from now, they'll begin to receive our feeble post-World War II television and radar emission. The response will likely be limited by the finite value of speed of light, but the answer to that mid-century call will arrive around the year 2350. So that might just be that we have finally developed enough to where we can let them know that we're here because of everything that we watch, etc., and they might come. Or they might watch our television, get really, really upset, and just decide they don't need us. We don't know. That's one side of it. Part 2, the don't exist debate. There's really just 2 arguments that really exist to say this. They're making the assumption that all the UFO sightings that we have seen are false and are not real, that all the ancient Sumerian texts, etc., are not real. And they begin from 2 arguments. Marshall Savage, who's the founder of the Living Universe Foundation, says that the odds against life are so extreme that it's impossible for it to occur twice. He says there's a strand called the Genesis DNA, which takes a ridiculously complex amount of chemical reactions to spawn life, a ridiculously amount of well-coordinated carbon atoms, and the mathematical figure is just ridiculous. They have to be placed together at a ridiculous speed of 100 times per second for 10 billion years. That undergoes a ton of different reactions. And even by doing that, we're still really, really short of the simple forms of DNA molecules that we have at the bottom of the ocean. So the ability to create that is so scientifically small that perhaps Earth just got really, really lucky. And that it was the unique coordination of 95% of our, or however many percent of our planet being covered in water and having humidity in the air that created the possibilities for this to exist. So that's one, is that it's just very, very unlikely that that would happen twice anywhere else. The conditions would have to be quite the same, and that's just not likely. Another argument is by Nick Bostrom. For those of you who don't know, he heads the Future of Humanity Studies Institute. And his argument begins from the preface that, yes, there are 100 billion stars in our galaxy alone, and that there are possibly 100 billion galaxies. And many of the stars in each of these galaxies all have planets circling around them. There are vast numbers of solar systems that have many types of planets and lots of temperature for all these things to exist. His argument is called the Great Filter, which says that, first, we have not had contact with any of the people from any of these infinite billions of galaxies. And with that being said, it's highly improbable that they exist because of it, because they probably would have found us already. There seems to be for him a great filter in either the past or the future that keeps technological civilizations from being able to travel through space. It's a probability barrier. It's not an actual barrier. And what his argument is that it's either happened in the past where we've already passed the great filter and we're the only ones that would be able to do it, which he's like, sick, that would be pretty good. And that would mean that other civilizations have not been able to do it because they just didn't have the right DNA or any number of things. Or it's coming in the future, and this barrier stops whatever civilizations that exist from going any further, from advancing technologically, or any number of things. I.e., there's just a limit to how much we can do technologically in any species across the world. And with that, his argument is just saying that the great filter is powerful enough that even with the billions of rolls of the dice on all the different planets, we've still ended up with nothing. So those probabilities that their filter exists is really high. It's either in the past and we don't have to deal with it, or whenever it comes in the future, it's just something that we're going to have to end up dealing with because it's going to be something that will face our race as well, our species, and we could go extinct before we reach the technological maturity to get past it. The kind of confrontation is similar, that maybe the aliens had the same type of political differences that we had, killed each other off before space travel, or that they just got into light space, didn't figure it out fast enough, died. There's asteroids that still fly around. We don't know. But that's the piece of evidence, is that whenever you're assessing risk probability, you do not take into account aliens because the probability is so low that they exist because of what Bostrom calls the Great Barrier. And even if they did exist, there are still multiple arguments. Even if they exist, people like Marshall Savage, who I mentioned earlier, says that whether or not we are truly alone in the universe is really immaterial. As far as we know, we are alone, and until we find out otherwise, it behooves us to proceed as if we're the only intelligent species in the whole space-time continuum. Another PhD in molecular nanotechnology from MIT, Eric Drexler, said, we shouldn't include aliens in our calculations because if they do not exist, we do not need to consider them in our plans. if they do exist, then they will overrule our plans according to their own inscrutable wishes, and there seems to be no way to prepare for that possibility. I.e., if they did decide